the Wi-Fi, but we ran a different port. So.
Good evening, students. Thank you for being here on this rainy day. Did anyone think they were getting a rain day today?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry. It didn't rain enough. Well, we're having a few issues with the stream, so hopefully it's staying with us. I tried a few things there, and we've had some help from the theater folks here, so thank you guys. Just wanted to briefly introduce Jordan Miller. She's the editor-in-chief for the Cypress Woods, what's the name of the publication?
Crimson Connection. Crimson
Connection. I should have known that. She's going to talk a little bit about the program here, just for the folks who are visiting, and then we're going to call up our guest speaker. So come on up, Jordan.
Hi everyone, I'm Jordan Miller and welcome to the Cypress Woods Student Journalism Network press conference. I'm the acting editor-in-chief for the Crimson Connection, the newspaper at Cypress Woods, which, though it may be small in number, with only 13 people working on our next print issue. I'd also like to give a shout out to our yearbook staff, which may or may not be here considering they're about to deadline for the last time, but because they do an amazing job with a huge task of spelling everyone in the entire school's name correctly. This year, our journalism department, with the help of our fabulous advisor, Ms. Picey, has become better and better with every deadline, and that couldn't have been possible without all the reporters, photographers, and editors who have constantly improved throughout the year. I would also like to say thank you to everyone for attending on a day where the weather hasn't been the greatest. We really appreciate it. Today, our guest speaker will be State Representative Alan Fletcher. Thank you for taking your time out of your day and coming to meet with us.
Thanks, Jordan. And just a reminder for the format, Representative Fletcher is going to give a brief intro, and we're going to open it up for some questions. Just remember to say your name, the name of the school that you represent, and also if you're watching the stream, we are using the hashtag CFISDpresser if you want to submit questions that way. And we're also using todaysmeet.com/CFISDpresser. So I will bounce in from time to time with some questions from the ether web. So without further ado, State Representative Alan Fletcher.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here. First of all, let me just say that it's one of the biggest honors of my life to have had the opportunity to represent the people of the great state of Texas in House District 130. You know, they call us state representatives because 98% of everything we vote on is for the entire state of Texas. But House District 130 runs kind of east over the Hooks Airport, kind of give you an idea of how far the east boundary is, all the way down to 1960 and Jones Road and back across to 290 and out all the way to Waller. And if you've ever looked at the county map, Harris County, we follow the Harris County line. Harris County goes all the way up to 1488, so that's a long ways. And I can tell you that over the last 8 years, I've had a chance to be involved in some really exciting times for the growth out here. You all are very much aware, you know, you're the third largest school district in the whole state of Texas. You're only behind Houston and Dallas. And that said a lot. And Cypress School District is an amazing entity. And Cypress itself, Cypress, Texas would be like the 11th largest city in the state of Texas if you were incorporated city. So we have a fast growing, huge area out here. I've had the opportunity to be the only member at one point of the Transportation Committee. And there's 150 members in the Texas House and there are 31 senators. I have a project for you as students, do some investigative work for me. There are 31 books in Proverbs, and there are 150 books in Psalms. And I can find nowhere in any of the records from Texas and the state of why the legislature has 150 House members and 31 senators. I can't find anything that talks about how they did that and set those numbers up based on the 31 books of Proverbs and 150 of Psalms. And when you arrive at the Texas House, in your desk there's a Bible, and all of us go to our Psalms, or the Senate obviously go to Proverbs, but I went to Psalms 130, and I retired from Houston Police Department, and I have the honor of being the only retired peace officer in the Texas legislature. That's a huge responsibility. I retired from the largest law enforcement agency in the state of Texas, Houston PD, and from the largest city. And I can tell you that when I went to Psalms 130, and you can look at it tonight, my wife and I, we own a security company. When I say my wife and I own a security company, I can tell you that I couldn't have served in our Texas legislature for the last 8 years if it hadn't been for my wife staying home and running our company. Because our company is what affords us the opportunity to be able to do that. You may not be aware of it. The Texas legislature is a citizens legislature. We meet every other year for 140 days. But I will tell you in all sincerity that the job entails being on the job 24/7. It's like being an old Houston police officer. I was a hostage negotiator for 15 years. I was on call in the SWAT team and made hundreds of call-ups. And I spent my whole life being on call in the Houston Police Department. And so I retired into the legislature where I now feel like I'm on call 24/7 and I love it. But it's just the only way, that's what I know, it's the way of life. But know this, our lieutenant governor, our 31 senators, and our 150 House members, we make $7,200 a year. It's $600 a month. If you take out the government taxes and you take out pension and you take out insurance for family members, some folks like that are younger than I that have small children still at home. All my kiddos are grown and have given me 6 beautiful grandchildren, as you probably saw in the bio. But they actually write a check in January, the first of each year, to pay the state of Texas. I actually clear the big bucks. I clear $155 a month. So, needless to say, I didn't go to the Texas legislature to ingratiate myself financially. I told everyone I ran the first time, I had been the chairman of the Chamber of Commerce in Tomball. There was a bill passed called the business margin tax, which is one that I've had a problem with since day one. The margins tax is responsible for taxing small businesses on the gross and not the net. And when I started my company, I assure you, we were feeding 100 families and making a lot of money when you look at the gross, but we weren't netting a profit for the first couple of years. And small businesses don't net a profit usually in the beginning. And so for the state of Texas to put a burden taxing them on their gross, I felt was unfair. And I was the chairman of the Chamber of Commerce in Tomball, Texas. And I went to the individual that was serving as our legislator, and I asked him about it. And he couldn't give me a good answer about why he supported that legislation. And when I went back and reported that to my chamber, I thought that was the end of it. But as the chairman of the board, I came out of a Rotary meeting one Wednesday, and the entire community was basically standing out there in Tomball, Texas. And they asked me to run, and I went home and talked to my wife about it, and we made the decision to do it. And I can tell you it was a good decision, one that I've felt honored to have the opportunity to serve in Texas over the last 8 years. We made a lot of difference out here, folks. The highway out here, US 290, all the way from the time you hit the county line until you get down to Loop 610 is the Ronald Reagan Memorial Highway. That's my legislation. I'm very proud of it. When we finish working on 290, and it will be finished one of these days, then we're going to put up all the signs. We don't want to put them up. You might have noticed one out at Waller when you come in from the county line there at Buc-ee's. It says the Ronald Reagan Memorial Highway. We have a warehouse full of Ronald Reagan Memorial signs that we bought and paid for with private money. We took up collections from people in the city and the community. And I can tell you that they'll come up when that's done. By virtue of being on transportation, I got involved in working on 249 and 290. You might notice that when you go in on 290 now, you can do a little flyover all the way over to the Katy Freeway. That's because of the cramped business, the traffic down at 290 and 610. You might have, our governor, Greg Abbott, is a gentleman who's in a wheelchair, and he was showing how he could move faster in his wheelchair on 610 and I-10 than we could in a car. And he was right. So we put that in. That was an amendment to the amendment. And the reason I was able to get the amendment in the first place to get the funding for 290 was that they came to me, TxDOT, and told me, we're going to finish the Grand Parkway. And y'all may not realize this, but the Grand Parkway that you're aware of, you might have written long ago, the criminal first money and first bills work of that. And TxDOT, they do highway plans because it's billions of dollars with a B. They do them based on 30 years. And 290 was not on the next 10-year plan, and 249 was not on the next 30-year plan. And I was able to get amendments on the Grand Parkway bill because they were trying to make up to me because they were putting Grand Parkway through my district, and it made a lot of people unhappy. Some people weren't thrilled about that freeway coming through their yard and their business and their ranches and their homes. And so it put a lot of pressure on the elected officials out there to work with folks. And I was able to help a lot of people that weren't being offered a fair amount of money for their property. And so I negotiated with them quite often. Y'all probably heard of Caldwell Companies, and Fred Caldwell is a businessman out here in the community and a fine Christian man. And I'll give you one example. I went into a meeting with Zachary Odebrecht, and Odebrecht's out of Brazil and Zachary's out of San Antonio. They had a problem with someone that wanted me to help them. And I sat down at the table and I asked them, what's the problem? And they started explaining. And then I said, well, who is that? And they told me it was Fred Caldwell and Caldwell Companies. And I slid my chair back and I said, I represent House District 130. And I said, Fred Caldwell is my friend and my constituent. The next time I see y'all, I'll be with him. So that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to represent the people of your district. And as I indicated a while ago, I'm not called a district representative, even though it's House District 130, I'm called a state representative. Because I served on business and industry. I served as vice chairman of Homeland Security and Public Safety. I was the chair of white collar crime. I served on transportation. I'm now the chairman of Texas Law Enforcement, which is a huge honor for me, being the only retired police officer. And my committee is tasked in this interim between sessions to work on emerging issues in technology. You may not be aware of it, but if a person gets a traffic warrant now and they get stopped by the police, you can, and it doesn't say shall, it says may. That gives the officer the prerogative to do so. But if a person accidentally has a traffic warrant, a class C misdemeanor, capable profile, the officer doesn't automatically have to take you to jail anymore and tow your car. You could, if you had a debit card or a credit card, you could pay for it at that point. And the state of Texas has over $1 billion in outstanding warrants, and so that's something that we're working on. I was also the author of the body camera bill. My son's a DPS trooper in the Woodlands. I love my daughters and I love my granddaughters and my daughter-in-law. My son is my hero. My son came out of high school in Tomball and told me that he wanted to be a police officer like myself and my father. And I said, well, son, when you're 21 years old and you finish graduating from San Francisco State, I would, we'll look and see what kind of job you can get. He said, well, I can be a peace officer now. And I said, really? I said, where? And he said, the U.S. Army. And I said, well, I don't know about that. I said, that scares me a little bit. And I'm a major in the Guard in the Army. And I said, we're at war, you know that, son? He said, yes, sir. And I said, I was thinking maybe you'd go to Sam Houston for a few years. And he said, well, I don't have to have your permission because I'm 18 years old. Unless your mom give me my permission, I won't do it. But I'm asking you for permission. And I said, son, why do you want to go to war? Why do you want to do that? And he said, well, Dad, not me, who? And that's all I had to hear. And I gave him my permission. And he went off to Iraq a couple of times. And he was gunner on MRAP, air assault, and MP. And like I said, he's my hero. He came back 3 years ago and married his high school sweetheart. And I got a 3-year-old grandson. And he's a BPS trooper out in the Woodlands. So I'll drive past him with him. He's a good man. He's bigger than me. He's 6'6" and 240. He's a really big man. But he's a gentle giant. He's a good man. I'm very proud of him. And I'm proud that he decided to go into law enforcement. It's an honorable profession. And we're just never going to get rich doing it. It's like these teachers here. None of these teachers are teaching you every day and working with you in the school because they want to get rich. They do it because they care. And no one's going to go in the legislature to get rich because you can't do it if you're an honorable person. That's not to say there's not people that aren't honorable and have figured out ways to cheat the system. But I've tried to do the job over the last years, and I know that some of the questions you have there, one of them is about why I'm not running for re-election. I've actually served now for 4 terms, and you can retire after 4 terms. And I promised my wife, and we've been married 37 years next month, April 16th. And I know that sounds like a long time to you, but it happened real quick for me, I promise you. And I promised her that if she supported me and kept our company open so we could afford for me to go off and do this and have the honor of serving in Texas, that when I could retire and come home, I would. And so I've been terminated, and I could stay for a lifetime if I won the lottery. But on the other hand, I think it's time to come home and let someone else have a chance to go up there and represent the people. It's been all encompassing. I've been very involved for a long time, and it's been a wonderful thing. You can look through the newsletter. That's the current stuff. But over the last 8 years, some of the legislation that I've been involved in passing, I'm very proud of. I don't know if you've seen the gunboats on the Rio Grande, the DPS have down there now. I was involved in that legislation. That was my bill. It was a bill for, I moved and allocated funds to asset forfeiture so DPS could have those boats for the Rio Grande. As I've indicated, getting the funding for 290 and 249, and the body camera bill. I'm the author of Campus Carry. I was explaining to your teacher that it's not, it's not the mess that everybody tries to act like it is, because it's not for high school, it's for colleges. And just to give you one example, when you hear people talking about Campus Carry and you hear all the negative stuff about people having guns on college campuses and you don't need to have weapons on college campuses, let me explain something to you. In a university like the University of Texas, which has got most of the press about being upset about Campus Carry, there's over 50,000+ students at the main campus in Austin, Texas. Out of that 50-something thousand, there's only 458 people that are over 21 years old that have a CHL. So the impression that they try to sell of 18, 19-year-old college kids in dorms and partying and having, frat parties, that's not what that law was about, and that's not what Campus Carry is about. For the simple fact that over the last 20-something years, CHL has been in effect in Texas, and there's over 800+ thousand, it's almost 1 million now, probably haven't counted since last session last year. But there's probably about 1 million people in Texas, and less than 1% of any kind of crime is committed by someone who has a CHL. But when you think about a university like UT, that has over 50,000 students just at their main campus, that with 458 people only, and it's easy to check on this stuff, because their state records are easy to pull up, and we know there are only 458 that are over 21 years old, because you have to be 21 to have a CHL, that were enrolled in that 50+ thousand students at UT. To make such a big commotion about campus carry is just kind of uncalled for. And plus, let me say, we were talking a while ago, I went to graduate school at Sam Houston State University and undergraduate at Texas Tech. And I can tell you that most of the folks at Sam Houston are peace officers, because that's the criminal justice university. But there's a lot of students there for the last 20-something years that have been sitting out under the tree studying before they go into the last pop quiz or before they go into class. Or folks coming by after work at night, after being, after working all day and coming to night classes, that had CHLs, that had weapons on them. And the law was that if they took that weapon into class, they were committing a felony. So they would either make the decision not to bring the gun at all and leave it out in the car, and we had cars getting broken into because they knew there were weapons out there. The bad guys find those things out. And then we passed legislation at one point to say you could leave the gun in your car, so you could actually bring it onto the campus and park in the parking lot. But when the request came for campus carry, it was just so that the men and women that were carrying CHLs didn't have to take their weapon back to their car after they'd sat there and studied before they went into the classroom. And if a CHL is done properly, it's a concealed handgun license, and no one knows you have the weapon at all, so it's not going to be disruptive in class. And I had college professors say to me, I don't want my students having weapons on them. What are they going to do if I give them a bad grade, or I talk back down to them because they did something wrong in class? I said, well, you don't need to worry about a 21-year-old that's never broken the law and has a license to carry a concealed weapon, because I don't think giving them a bad grade or talking down to them in class is going to cause them to decide after becoming a 21-year-old that they're going to pull a weapon and shoot you. It might be the 18-year-old that's on drugs that has no CHL, that might not have been vetted for that might be carrying a gun illegally, you're worried about. And I also said that when they talked about the fact that it was going to cost millions of dollars for security for campus, if we allowed for campus carry, that as far as I was concerned as a peace officer, if you had a bunch more CHL campus carriers, Texas people that are over 21 carrying, you might cut back on your security budget. So when you hear these people talking about it, you just take a look at the overall process. And by the way, when I carried and passed the body camera bill, peace officers in Texas want body cameras. Your law enforcement want the people to be able to go look and see the job that they're doing. My son told me a few years ago, Dad, if y'all don't pass some legislation to get a body camera on me, I'm going to buy one myself and wear my own body camera. Because those DPS cars, most peace officers' cars now, and by the way, most officers have body cameras now. Those cars, though, when you get stopped by the DPS, that's all on video and audio. So if it's out in front of the vehicle, they can hear and see everything that's going on. But they really want that body camera because, look, peace officers don't want bad officers out there. If there's some officer out there doing something bad, that body camera documents it, we'll get rid of it. But what's good to know is that body camera is also going to make sure that it's going to kind of educate society about how silly people act when they deal with law enforcement sometimes. Because there's some folks out there acting a fool that the officers are having to deal with. And that body camera bill is one that I have spent a lot of time working on to make sure that you're in journalism and communications, and so that open records requests couldn't just be filed by a local television station, that every day, no matter what happens, 24/7, they want every piece of camera, every piece of tape that's taken for body cameras to be turned over to them. You have to know somebody in the video and ask by name, and you have 24 hours before it gets released. We put a lot of things in there that protected society and protected the agency, because let me explain something to you. A $300 or $400 or $500 body camera is not the cost. The expense is the redaction of the tapes, because if you go into a house on a disturbance call and there's a minor child in there, that child's face cannot show up on that video when it goes to court, or when it gets sent out to a local TV station if they get an open records request. Someone has to go through and redact that face and black it out. Plus, names, the storage and the filing of all these records are a critical issue. So the storage and the redaction issues are what really cost a lot of money, and that's why the body camera bill was much more than the cost of a body camera to put it on somebody. So I'm going to hush and let y'all ask some of these questions you have on that sheet. I saw them, any that you thought of on your own. And those are just teacher questions. Y'all might have something that you want to ask that the teachers would come up with. So feel free, and I'd love to answer any question you might have. Yes, young man.
How do you think the needs for better campus security coincides with the push for open carry in the community?
Well, open carry now is not a campus issue. They're not allowed to carry openly on our campuses, so the two don't really correlate. I mean, with respect to campus carry, it would be a totally different issue. But campus police officers are state peace officers, so, I don't think you're gonna have to have an increase of campus carry over open carry. So he's carrying openly on campus, and I believe this is a peace officer. I think when civilians carry openly, it's disruptive. It would be disruptive on campus, so that's why we've excluded that. It's only concealed carry. If that answers your question. Yes, ma'am.
I'm Miller from Cypress High School. And what do you think is the most significant thing that you've done as a state legislator?
Oh, wow, that's a good question. The most significant may be, I was able to carry some legislation, that the Homestead Act, which was with respect to our Hazelwood Act, I should say, the Homestead Act, the Hazelwood Act, where our veterans, are promised monies for their spouses and their children, and we had some legislation that was coming through the House that was going to actually take that benefit away. And that's, when you promise somebody something and they serve our country, that's something that you don't want to take back. In Texas, we're as good as our word. If we say we're going to fund it, we're going to fund it. And so I carried legislation and fought that back, and so we still do what we said we were going to do. So that means a lot to me because I care a lot about our veterans. I love what I've been able to do in transportation. I've been very involved in the funding. Our infrastructure is very critical. This Grand Parkway, 290, 249, mean a lot to our economy out here. And you have to understand that it's not just you get to and from work or school, it's the emergency vehicles being able to move on it. It's for our economy to go. And when you're on transportation, you deal with everything from the ports to the airports to the railways and the highways. So I've been to Panama 3 times. They're expanding the Panama Canal for the super tanker. Texas does not have a port that's deep enough for the super tanker to come. Have any of you ever seen the new super tanker that's going to be coming through the expanded Panama Canal? Let me blow you away. Wrap this around your mental picture. Have you seen the picture or stood in front of our state capitol? You know how big our state capitol is in Austin? I see a lot of nodding, so you are fortunate. A lot of folks haven't had a chance to ever go and see it. You can put 2 of those end-to-end inside the cargo hold of the super tanker. And the containers that are stacked on top of the deck are taller than Lady Liberty on top of the state capitol. Now think about how big that is. The draw on that ship is 52 foot. So it can't be in water that's less than 52 foot deep. The Port of Houston, which has billions of dollars every year coming through it, and a lot of industry and economy, and you've seen those monster ships down there, those container ships on there, the ship channel is only 48 feet deep. So we need 4 feet. And guess what? It's $1 billion a foot. And guess what? The silt drifts in every year for a foot, so it's $1 billion a year from now on. And let me tell you, the Chinese, they have decided that they spent $1 billion of our US dollars, the Chinese, in Kingston, Jamaica, in the port of Kingston, and to work on their infrastructure. Because Kingston, Jamaica, their port is 460 feet deep. God did that. They're the 3rd deepest port in the world. And so the Chinese want to offload their containers there as they come through the Panama Canal from the east, from China, and then disseminate it throughout the Western Hemisphere. In America today, there's only 4 ports that can accept a super tanker. That's Virginia, that's the military naval base, and they're not doing a lot of cargo accepting there. You've got New York City, you've got Seattle up in Washington, and you have Long Beach, which is really the LA port, but it's in Long Beach just south. But that's the only 4 ports that are actually deep enough to accept a super tanker. But not Miami, not Brownsville, not Houston. So we're going to have to do something about that, and that's coming in the near future. So that's why we're going to Panama and working with them, trying to get that work done. Obviously, our railroads in our country go west, young man. You've heard the story. Our rail lines run east and west. There are north and south, major rail lines to east and west. That's why Dallas-Fort Worth is a major inland port area, because all the containers and all the warehouses. I've carried some legislation last session and the one before. Texas led the nation in Medicaid fraud, and I've been listening to these presidential debates and being on the inside, I know a little bit about some of the legislation. It was interesting to hear them say the other day that California leads the nation in Medicaid fraud. Well, I carried legislation to give the investigators, or they were called inspectors, inside the Health and Human Services Division, police powers, so they're now investigators, and they have police powers where they can get warrants and search warrants and interrogate and make arrests. And so we don't lead the nation in Medicaid fraud anymore. And Texas, because of our amazing economy and growth, led the nation in cargo theft. And I heard Marco Rubio the other night comment about the fact that his state, Florida, leads the nation in cargo theft. And the reason they did the nation in cargo theft is because I carried legislation that has made cargo theft an enumerated offense in the penal code and the Code of Criminal Procedure. And it was always prosecuted under the theft statutes. And these good attorneys would always go in and find the guy on the forklift and file on him and work the case out with him, But the crook that owned the warehouse or that stole the tractor trailer truck or the guy that was there on the floor directing them, I've actually seen videos. Y'all been in Sam's Clubs and Sam's and Costco's? I've seen videos where warehouses are just like one of those businesses, where the man on the floor with the headset directing the truck to back up, and the person on the forklift unloading the stuff and putting it in a line of baby diapers and flat screen TVs and Monster drink. Everything you see, the warehouse, the guy on the forklift, the guy on the ground, the guy backing the truck up, everything you see, the building is a criminal operation. Everything's really, it's all stolen, the truck's stolen, everybody's a crook. And so now we have a cargo theft statute that's in the Code of Criminal Procedure and the Penal Code that allows us to prosecute it like the RICO statute, so we can bring them all together. Because that product is coming from out of state, those tractor trailers from out of state. There's a lot of jurisprudence issues that come into play on trying to prosecute those cases where they're crossing state lines, where there's equipment and product. You know, you always have to, like in the old days when I was a young Houston cop, and I can say this now that there's not really authorities anymore, but we do wagon calls at Foley's for shoplifters. And I would get upset when my wife would go shop at Foley's, because after being a police officer and doing wagon calls at Foley's for shoplifters, I learned that everything had 100% markup. If it cost $50 at Foley's, they paid $25. If it cost $100 at Foley's, they paid $50. So everything was 100% markup. And so that's what we have to do when we prosecute crime. You don't get to prosecute somebody for retail price, you prosecute for what the cost of the item is. So those factors all come into play. So some of these things that we've been able to do have made a real difference in what we were able to accomplish. And so that's a long answer to some of the bills that I think have made a difference. But I think when 290 is finished and Grand Parkway is finished and 249 are finished, you're going to think I did something special there. Any questions? Yes, sir.
Ben Richardson from the Cypress Woods Crimson Connection. I was wondering how your career in law enforcement prepared you for your current role as a state representative.
Well, you're going to love this answer because I made him laugh in the Texas legislature when I got in front of Mike and told him. I was actually a hostage negotiator. I was one of the founding members of the hostage team at HPD, and I was a negotiator for 15 years, and I made 360-something call-ups, and many of them before y'all were born, and I retired in 98, so even that before you were born. But I can tell you that back in those days, I joked about the fact that as the primary hostage as a negotiator, barricaded suspects from bank robbers to the corner to folks that were having psychological issues, which all the other day saw the poor lady that was on the truck out here. That would have been my job in the old days. I wasn't the person who showed up and tried to talk her off the top of the truck. I've had worse than that, actually. But I joked about the fact that I went to the mic at the Texas legislature to lay out my first bill. I said, you know, I'm a retired Houston police officer. And I said, I was a hostage negotiator for 15 years. I am prepared to be in the Texas legislature. I've talked to a lot of crazy people. So we didn't call them crazy, let's call it a trigger word. You don't use those kind of words when you talk to people. But so I think being a peace officer had a lot to do with that. You know, the neat thing about the job that I think is a good comparison is when I was a young detective back in the early days, you go in with a caseload of 30 cases, let's say. Every detective had a 30 caseload. And the cases are made up of complainants and suspects and witnesses, and you have all these, when you show up in the morning, you might think, well, I'm going to call the complainant on this case. And the phone rings and it's a witness for another case. Or you might get a clue or a call might come in about so-and-so might be the person who did that robbery. So then you start working on that. So what I've always liked about the legislature is if you knew what I had already done today before I got here, the kind of things that happened since I got in the office this morning. And I'll just give you a quick overview. I had a deputy sheriff come in that asked me to talk to someone about an assignment that he's interested in inside the sheriff's department. He knows that I know the people and he wanted me to call and kind of recommend it for him. Then I had a gentleman come in with a letter from Jag Gill over at Hooks Airport, and they want to put a U.S. Customs facility at Hooks Airport. And Lone Star is building one, but they want me to write a letter to the governor about having a customs facility there. And then I had a gentleman come in from A&M, who's over grants and acquisitions at A&M, and wanted to talk to me about some security at A&M, because he's involved in working on the foreign national students and wanting to make sure that the people that are going to A&M are there for the right reason and because of the terrorist situation. You know, our congressman out here, Michael McCall, for right where we're standing, is the chairman of Homeland Security and Public Safety. And Michael and I are personal friends, and he says that the reason he's in the U.S. Congress is because of House District 130, because he lives in East Austin, and it's very, Travis County is the People's Republic of Travis County. It's very Democrat, and it comes down through Texas, through, you know, it comes all the way through Elgin and Giddings and Bremen, and it gets down into Harris County. But here in House District 130 in Northwest Harris County is the Republican stronghold that allows him to get elected in the U.S. Congress. So Michael McCall thinks a lot of Tomball, a lot of Cypress and Cypher. And by the way, when I first got elected, it was quite an issue for me, and there's a reason why my office is over here, is because all three of my kids graduated from Tomball High School. And I was the chairman of the chamber, the Tomball Chamber of Commerce. But I was a police officer all my life, and I spent all my life going to Houston and working every day and coming home. So when I got asked by the community out there as the chairman of the Tomball Chamber of Commerce to run for the legislature, there's a lot of folks out here that were concerned that I was going to be the state representative for Tomball, and I wasn't going to be the state representative for Cypress and Cypher. And so my office is out here in Skinner and 290, to let the folks at Cypress and Cypher know that I'm everybody's state rep, and I've proven that over the last 8 years. I have a lot of good friends, Leslie Martone with the Chamber of Commerce, and Debbie Fletcher, who's a member of the school board, and a lot of good folks, Stuart Snow, the CFO, you know, all the different individuals that are part and have been a part of the community out here in South Fair to know that I'm the people's representative. And I've tried to, we work hard. We put a lot of hours in Sharon. You're only as good as the people that work with you. Sharon Slover, my district director, is amazing. I brought you all in my office. She's here 9 to 5 Monday through Friday. She loves to have visitors. She'll show you around. It's kind of neat and stuff that we put together. Go by and visit her anytime you want to. My chief of staff is Robert Peters. He's in Austin, Texas. And during session, we have several young college interns, and love for y'all to keep that in mind. I know Tom Hollerson, that's going to be taking my place, is going to need interns. And so if any of you go to school where it's convenient to be here during Lone Star College and you want to intern with Sharon, you could, or if you're up in the Austin area, if you're attending the school in that area, anything from Texas State to, you know, the private schools there, Austin Community College, and there's a Catholic school there, there's a private school.
St. Edward.
Yes, St. Edwards. I actually had a district director that was there, or a communications director that did that. And by the way, it's a good stepping stone because one of my legislative directors in my office is now the head of communications for Ken Paxton in the Attorney General's office. And she came from her job record in her resume is because she worked as my legislative director. So it's a good place to put in some time. You don't make any money, but you definitely learn a lot, and you get a chance to get some college credit. The schools give you credit for spending time with us. Anyway, any other questions? Yes, ma'am. Okay, go ahead. Yeah, she already asked a question.
Do you feel that public universities should be able to opt out of the campus carry bill the same way that private schools are able to?
No, we don't like the fact that and let me tell you why the private schools get to opt out. It's public, it's private property. But the reason that they were even in the bill, can y'all hear me? Because I hate standing behind these things. The reason the private schools were even in the bill was because Trey Martinez Fisher, he just ran for the Senate and lost Jose Menendez. Trey Martinez Fisher told me that he would take down 118 amendments that the Democrats had put up to kill the bill if I would give him and include the private institutions with the state institutions. Now, the state institutions are state facilities and they're not private, so that's why we decided. It's just like when somebody says, I want to, I don't want to drive 55. Well, the law is 55. We took a lot of time and effort and put a lot of thought into why we're passing this legislation and these bills. And we put a lot of leeway in there. There's daycare centers, there's religious facilities, there's medical schools. There's a lot of things that are going to have permission in the bill to opt out. But the rank and file, day-to-day student that's got a CHL, that's going to go to class, is going to be allowed to in the great state of Texas because the governor signed it into the law in Texas now to carry a concealed weapon on a college campus. And UT and all the state schools are going to learn that come September. Wait and see. It's just the law, and there's a reason for it. Yes, ma'am. You got a question before we turn that?
What changes do you foresee impacting public education, specifically for CFIC students in the next 5 years?
Well, I can tell you that because you are the third largest and the way you're growing out here, you may, with inner cities being what they are and the economy being what it is in Houston, Texas, I wouldn't be surprised if you don't move up because the growth out here is phenomenal. If y'all see what's happening out here with Daikin and the 200,000 square feet, and that's really 2,000 to 5,000 new employees right out here at Kickapoo and 290. I can tell you that right out at Kickapoo and 290 on both sides of the road, there's going to be a subdivision that legislation's already been done, and it's the utility district bills and everything, which is twice as big as Fairfield. So the growth, there was a time back in the day when Waller, it's kind of confusing, y'all. As a state representative in a county of over 1 million, you can't leave the county line. But I actually have Waller High School, Waller Football Stadium, and half of the city of Waller. But there's Waller County. So everybody thinks that I've got Waller County but I don't have Water County. I have water. And Water High School. And there was a time after 6 o'clock at night, you had to go to CVS pharmacy there at 29.20 and 2.90 to get a gallon of milk or a loaf of bread. And in the very near future, there'll be everything from, Safeway, not Safeway, but Kroger and H-E-B and Randall's, and there'll be Lowe's and there'll be Home Depots, and it's all coming out that way. They're all asking. Cisco's moving out and expanding, and Carrier's moving out there, and the growth out here in the Cypress area is just absolutely exploding. See, all that's Cypress. All that'll be Cypress School District stuff. The water line comes down, but most of that is Cypress. So your growth out here is going to be phenomenal, and I hope that the infrastructure can keep up with it, and I hope that it's just so tough on your parents, and it'll be tough on y'all soon. Because it won't be long. Y'all be working, married, making livings out here, and you'll be paying in that tax base as well. So it costs money to keep these places nice. Look around. This is pretty impressive. You go to school in a beautiful place, and I'd be very proud if I were you to go around the state of Texas and tell people I'm from South here, because you know what? HISD in Houston have a bad reputation, and Dallas does as well. And you're the third largest, and you have a fabulous reputation. The teachers are here because they want to be. That's important. That's way important. Some of the teachers that teach in the inner city of Houston and Dallas don't want to be there. You don't have teachers in South Fair that don't want to be here. You got plenty of teachers in other school districts that want to be here. So I think you're blessed to be in the South Fair School District, and I think in the next few years it's just going to get better, but it is going to get bigger. You realize we have 81 schools, 11 high schools, 130,000 plus students. That's a big old school district. Your school board has a lot to say grace here, don't they? It costs a lot of money to keep this place open every day. It costs a lot of money to the state if they close it today for rain. That's the weighted average daily attendance, and the state pays money for daily attendance. And every time the school closes for weather or closes for an emergency, the state of Texas doesn't pay that WAD, that weighted average daily attendance. That water costs your school district a bunch of money. So those teachers, they pray that they can have you come to school every day. They don't like those snow days and the ice days and the rain. Of course, I don't remember ever missing school because of rain, just for the record. They close y'all for rain? You have rain days? I doubt it. I bet they don't want to. I know it floods down in Houston. I mean, they get kind of flooded sometimes, but not out here.
Cypress.
Yeah, the creek,
Yeah,
I
the
guess.
creek
Yeah, I
floods.
guess it has. In the old days, I mean, a lot of times they're putting so much concrete down that some of these subdivisions that come in, we have to really put a lot of thought into the flood control district, because when you put that concrete in those houses and those foundations, they move the water. It doesn't go in the ground anymore. It moves over into the next area and it floods. So those are things we have to keep an eye on. Anybody else have another question? Yes, ma'am.
So now that you finished your last term, what are some of the things that you have reflected on that you thought you could change throughout your state?
Things that I reflected on that I didn't get to change or did?
No, like things that you could have changed.
Could have changed. Well, I think I've changed, made a lot of difference in a lot of things that I wanted to, transportation-wise and business and industry-wise. The margins tax went from $2,000 a year to $40,000 to $400,000 to $2 million, and I say probably next session we'll probably finally do it. But the oil and gas industry is really hurting that right now, because Texas, I don't know how big our budget is, biannually. We have a biannual system here. We meet every other year for 140 days. And we get our state reps and we work 24/7. It's like I say, all seriousness, it's called an interim. But during the interim, I have committee meetings all over the state of Texas for business and industry and transportation, and my committee, law enforcement. But I can tell you right now that the state of Texas spends $181 billion every 2 years. That's what our last budget was. And so 90-something billion dollars a year, billion's a lot of money. That billion makes a difference if you start looking at what that is. But 80-something% of all of our budget is already spoken for education and health and human services. So we only have about, let's just round up and say 20% of the money we spend on everything else. And there's a whole bunch of everything else in the great state of Texas. It's a big place. I was in DC last week for the Energy Council, and I can tell you, you turn left, you're Ubering, by the way. That's kind of a really cool thing. I love Uber. I've Ubered all over the country now, and I love it better than cabs. Cab drivers would hate me for saying that, but it's true. They're cleaner and more effective and cost effective. You have money, no money changes hands over your credit card on the file. But we turn left and we're in Maryland, we take a right and you're in Virginia, and next thing you know, you're back in DC. That doesn't happen in the great state of Texas. You get up at daylight and drive all day, you're still in Texas. But I kind of love it. I kind of like it. I met some folks in the Energy Council from Alaska, and I informed them that even though they think they're bigger than Texas, they're nothing every day. So what else, young people? Oh, yes, ma'am.
Kiara St. Clair, Sunwood. You sponsored the campus carry bill in the House. What are you hoping that the law will achieve on college campuses?
Well, I'll be glad when everybody gets over it and we get this thing up and running. But what I think will happen is I think that the bad guys know what's going on, and the bad guys don't follow the law. And if the bad guys think it's some young lady walking across, and I'm not trying to be a male chauvinist about this, but I have daughters, and I worry about you young ladies more than I do these lovely boys. And I want when a young lady gets out of class at 10 o'clock at night and she's trying to better herself, maybe she's got a husband that's working and he's at home with 2 kids after he's come home and she's decided to go to class at night. I'd like to think that when you leave, and I don't know if any of you, those of you that haven't had a chance to do this yet, but you went to Sam, you told me. Sometimes when you get out of class at night, it's dark and it's a long ways from the class out to where your car's parked. These parking lots are not close. And I'd like to think that a young lady, whether she decides to avail herself of the opportunity to have a CHL, a concealed handgun or not, the bad guy doesn't know. And it's what they don't know that protects you. You might have a gun in your purse, you might have a gun in your briefcase or your backpack. And I'd like to think that, when you're walking across that campus that you're safer because of that. And it's not that you're peace officers, and it's not that you're doing anything to use your weapon to be a peace officer. It's for you to protect yourself. And it's what the bad guy thinks. And when I spoke to Prairie View the other day, I had an auditorium that I was telling somebody twice as big as this, and it was full. And they have a really good attitude about it at Prairie View. UTSA, after they heard the law and learned further about it, they did too. And I think as time goes on, people will realize that it's really much ado about nothing. Because when you have a school that has 50,000 students and only 458 of them are legal to carry, that means if you see some student at this high school carrying, they're breaking the law. And if you see some 18, 19, or 20-year-old, they're 18, 19, or 20 and they're at a college state campus, and they're carrying, they're breaking the law. So it's going to be that honest person, the one that's never broken the law, the one that didn't have a criminal history, the one that got the CHL at 21 years old or older. And by the way, I finished my undergraduate and graduate degrees both when I was in my 30s. So I had a wife and 3 kids and was working. So there's people that are on these campuses, especially when there's 50-something thousand, that are not 18, 19, 20-year-olds. And CHL, campus carry, is about licensed CHL carriers. So I think it's going to be a good thing. The first time that I hear or read that some young lady or man keeps himself from being robbed or attacked or assaulted because they were able to protect themselves, that's going to make me feel like it's all worth it. Because if it's just one, that's enough. Yes, sir. Anybody wait, hold on a second. Anybody asking a question that hasn't asked a question? We'll get you in a second. Yes,
Hi, I'm Maddie Corlappen from Cypress High School.
Yes,
I was wondering if or when we could expect any changes in the rate of tolls on the Grand Parkway.
Well, let me tell you about the Grand Parkway and the Heck Road and the whole thing. None of this is private. This is all Harris County. And Harris County Toll Road Authority is self-sustaining. And the old thing that you will, we're going to have the Beltway and it's going to pay for itself and the Beltway is going to be free. There's no such thing as ever, look, first of all, it's an oxymoron. There's no such thing as a free road. We all pay taxes and all of our roads cost us money. Some of them you get tolled extra. And I did talk to your parents and I did talk to the people of District 130 at town halls. And I said, would you like your taxes to go up? Or would you like the opportunity to have a toll road that you can use when you're in a hurry and you want to pay the toll? But in Texas, we promise to always have a free alternative. Let me assure you, when you go to New York City, you're going to have a pocket full of quarters. Because you'll turn left in New York City and you'll hit a toll road and there's nowhere to go and nowhere to get where you're going unless you pay the toll. That never happens in Texas. You always have a free alternative. There are sections of the Grand Parkway where once you get on, you can't get off, but you've made the decision to get on. Point I'm making is if you're coming up 249, you can be on the service road and it's free. You can go out Hardy Toll Road, you can be on Old Hardy and it's free. We have free alternatives in Texas and we'll always have free alternatives. But HECTRA uses the money they make off the tolls to pay for the future next expansion of the next toll road. They use it to pay the officers that are working on the toll roads and the employees that are working the toll booths. Most everything's going automated now, by the way, and that's good. But the maintenance and everything, the upkeep of the roads, the fix them and work on all the rails and the highways, that's what that money goes for. So the county makes decisions, in Commissioners Court, they make decisions about how much they're going to charge for the respective tolls. And I think I noticed the other day that the Grand Parkway is a little cheaper right now than Hardy Toll Road. I actually saw that the other day. And I think the Beltway, but you have different sections that cost different amounts. By the way, though, these guys are engineers and they're pretty sharp. There's not much anywhere you can get on and get off without paying. Once you make the commitment, you've committed to spending some money. I personally don't understand why anybody wouldn't get the Easy Pay because they're good all over Texas. What they do is they hit your credit card every $40. I think they need to raise it because it gets hit too often. Because there's so many toll roads now, if you're using the Grand Parkway, you have the Hardy Toll Road going out the airport, or 249 on a daily basis now going out towards Louisville. You'll spend that 40 pretty quick. When they sit, you see how sometimes on the Beltway, how it backs up and where they're going through and paying? I mean, these lines are huge, especially on the weekends. I just think that having the Easy Tag is the only way to go. But I don't know if that answers your question or not. The reality of it is, I try to make sure that everybody understands, don't let anybody kid you. The toll roads are never going to be paid for. The toll roads pay the next toll road, and the next toll road, and the next toll road. And they all need to be expanded, and the Grand Parkway is not even finished. So what you're paying, when you run the Grand Parkway now, it's going to go ahead and finally finish that last piece, which is billions of dollars. It's very, very expensive, very expensive. Yes, ma'am.
What is the last piece of the Grand Parkway?
Well, it's 45 across down to past 59. So it's that last section on the south side. And if you go out there and look, there's just not a lot of commerce out there. You know, you miss it, but it's past the extent of the port and everything else. It's just still a little, it's not populated like out here. We needed to finish this 10 and 290 corridor because of the movement out there. There's just so many people moving. So that'll be the last piece to get finished, and it will get finished. 290 is going to be finished by April of next year completely. And 249 will be finished before that. It's pretty well almost done now inside of Harris County, but it's going all the way to Minnesota. So they're fixing to break that last piece. And by the way, that bypass, if you ever been over to Tomball, that bypass that had signs up that said future toll road, I was the chairman of the chamber when we did that. And we went to Austin to meet with TxDOT. I wasn't in the legislature, and we carried a sign up there without the flashing pins on it that said, Tomball, hometown with a heart, in need of a bypass. Guess what? We didn't get it. Because Dallas came up there with a check the size of a Volkswagen bus for $10 million, and they got their toll road before we got ours. But when they put that bypass in, it was user to loser money. There was $12 million in the budget. So they put the $12 million bypass in, and the other piece was never done for over a decade. So when I got in the legislature, it was obviously something I wanted to finish. And I'm really proud that it's done. And every time I fly over, going to Willbrook, and I fly down and get on the Beltway now without having to go down that Death Trap Service Road, I'm proud of that. And many's the time I've had to go into Houston, of course, the Galleria, and let me give you a little insight of baseball. If you'll take that flyover from 34th to 290 over to 10th and go out to the next intersection, Chimney Rock, and turn left, it'll take you over in the back way of the Galleria, and you get there a lot faster than using 290 and 16. That's how I race over the Galleria area for meetings and stuff when I need to. People over in those neighborhoods probably don't like that, but we don't live over there, do we? We live out here. So what else? You got a question?
Do you feel that teachers should be able to allow to have handguns on high school campuses to prevent, since you are so strong on preventing crime at college campuses, how would you help prevent crime on high school campuses?
Well, a lot of the schools have law enforcement and have actually, their own, like contracts with local PDs like Tomball and different constables in here. But now this is a personal thing. We have to make decisions all the time in the legislature about what society is ready for. And you know why one-star college and the junior colleges aren't going into effect for a year after the other state schools? Is because they were concerned about the fact that some high school students go on to the junior colleges and community colleges to get credit, and they were concerned about you. I personally think that any one of your teachers or anyone on this campus that's involved, that's 21 years old, and could go out and legally get a CHL should be able to carry a concealed weapon to protect you and themselves. That would be my personal opinion. But you can't carry legislation just because you think it sounds good. You got to carry legislation you can pass. And it was not easy passing open carry, and it wasn't easy passing campus carry. Because we had a lot of people pushing back on it. But we realized that the majority of the people in Texas wanted it, or it wouldn't pass. Because I assure you, we don't carry legislation to make you mad at home. We carry legislation because our constituents want it. So if it was up to me, you bet. I think every one of your teachers ought to be carrying it to legally carry it and proficient to know what to do. Because I just cannot fathom the idea of someone coming into these schools and damaging and hurting people and getting away with it. Like, you know, back a few years ago when the young man was running down the halls in Lone Star College over here, off of Barker Cypress, and was cutting people with a box cutter? That's just terrible. I mean, that someone could be on the campus and then nobody could do anything, for a long time until somebody got there to help.
But as you said earlier, since they do contract out with the local police departments, wouldn't they be able to step in and help them?
I mean, peace officers not real big about civilians helping when it comes to guns. But,
So then why would you support the carry laws?
well, because the reality of it is the police aren't there when they do it. Because that's the advantage of CHO. Because how often do you think when the bad guy attacks somebody or assaults them on a college campus, especially like at night walking across the campus to a parking lot, that a peace officer is right there, it's well over with and gone, and that person's assaulted and hurt, killed, raped, beaten up, been robbed, and the bad guy's gone, and all the police officer gets to do is take the report.
But I'm talking
but
about at a high
happens in
school
reality.
campus.
Do what?
I'm talking about at a high school campus, because you brought Lone Star in, and that's in our area.
Mhm.
Do you feel that the peace officers at Lone Star would have been able to help if they were there?
If they were there.
Do you think they should increase funding then for police officers on campus?
Oh, absolutely. As the chairman of Texas Law Enforcement, when you talk about increasing funding for peace officers, you bet. I think we can't spend enough for our officers to make sure that there's enough and plenty of them and they're well funded. Did y'all see on the news this week where our Navy SEALs, one of the most elite military organizations in the entire nation, that they're having, when they come back from their tours of duty, are having to give their guns up, their weapons that they use, they learn, the snipers, the special, to the other folks, because we don't have enough guns to give our other SEALs. That's a little side thing, that bothers me a lot. That's a Democratic administration, what that is. Of course, I'm a Republican, so that's no secret either, so I say things like that about Democrats. I have a lot of good friends on the Democrat side of the aisle there, who just disagree on most things. And they try to kill my bills, and I do kill theirs. Because we have the majority. There was a time when they had the majority, and guess what? They killed our stuff. So it's time for us to make sure that our legislation gets passed. But they do a good job of getting in the way.
We had a web question come in. How important, when you talk about the growth in the area and how big we are, and how important is a fast growth district like this to a thriving political and economic climate?
Well, it's very important. It's one of our major priorities. Our lieutenant governor, who was our senator, his number one priority when he got into the legislation, he became a senator, was about schools and about margins tax and working on. And when you talk about Cypress, for all of us that have districts like this, it's huge. There's state reps though that have. See, I'm only one of 25 in Harris County, and I have this big, huge piece here in Northwest Harris County called District 130. There's state reps in Stephenville, Texas, for example. They have 22 counties. Because the population is such that their 22 counties that they represent don't have as much. We all have the exact same of population. That's how we divide the districts up. So when you think about this, I have a little bit of Katy, all of South there, all of Tomball, a little bit of Klein, piece of Waller, because I have the high school and the stadium, not the other schools over in Waller County. So when you think about it, I have just that little bit to deal with, and the superintendents and the school boards that I deal with. What about a guy that has 22 counties? I know House members that have over 100 school districts and 100 superintendents and 100 school districts. But their population is no different because those schools have 400 people in it. How many do we have in Cypress Woods? How many thousand?
Over
Yeah.
3,000.
Yeah. Well, I graduated from Brady High School. We had 400 something students, and my graduating class in 1973 was 71. They get a little specialized attention. Those are good schools. I want you to know something. When I went to Texas Tech, I was ready. My son graduated from Tomball High School, was in the top quarter of his class, made A's and B's, and he had to take remedial math and English when he got to Lone Star, and I was ticked because they said he wasn't ready. But I said, well, then why did you graduate? I told John Newbauer, who's retired now, I talked about John. I love him. He's a good man. But I said, John, how can you graduate my son from Tomball High School with A's and B's, and he's in the top quarter of the class, and he's not ready to go to Lone Star College? Well, I said, well, John, that's not right. And you need to come out of these high schools prepared to go to college, if you want to go to college. But guess what? That's something that's very important too. Did you know, and it's going to come as a shock, not everybody's supposed to go to college. And just for the record, some of the guys I went to school with that didn't go to college, I wished I had the money they have in the bank. I say that all sincerity. It's not all about money, but it's about making a living and enjoying life. And it's not always the best thing to go to school for 4, 6, 8 years and run up hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt and then spend the rest of your life trying to pay it off. If what you really want to do is work on diesel engines, or if you want to be a plumber, or you want to be a carpenter, or you want to be a painter, or whatever. Some of these people out there that went into those kind of industries made a fortune. One of my buddies, we're talking about him today at lunch, he decided he wanted to be a farmer. His big brother was a dentist, and his little brother was a dentist, and he went to school with me at Texas Tech, and he had a double major, and he got accepted to half a dozen dental schools. And he went home and told his daddy, I want to be a farmer like you. And he is, and he has been for the last 40 years. You know, he's got a bank in Lubbock, and he's got a fertilizer company, and he farms 4,000 acres of cotton up out of Terry County between Brownsville and New Mexico. And his daughter and son are running a grape operation, and they provide the majority of the grapes from Messina Hawk over here in Bryan College Station. And we all wish we had the money he got. And he's not a dentist, but he's a farmer. So it's all about what you want to do, and don't let people pressure you into thinking that the only future you have is to go to a 4-year college. And by the way, I would recommend, and all of my kids are graduates, North Texas and Southwest Texas, when it was Southwest Texas, and they started off at Lone Star, these junior colleges. And by the way, this one's an amazing junior college. But that's not a bad start either. Now, if you get scholarships and you can afford it, maybe you're blessed and you have the money and you have scholarships, do what you like. I know there's lots of good Aggies and Red Raiders out there, and Sam Houston, Bearcats. We went to Sam, but I can tell you that there's a lot of different options. But just find something you want to do that makes you happy, that you enjoy life. I will tell you that if you get into politics, it's nice to have a bunch of degrees. They think that's important for some reason, but it's not. Next, yes, ma'am.
Jordan Miller, Cypress Woods High School. Do you have any hopes or predictions for the 2016 elections on both state and national levels?
I have a lot of hopes and predictions. I don't know predictions. It's kind of weird this time. I think it's kind of strange. I would very much like to see a Republican win, and any Republican would do. But I actually endorsed Senator Ted Cruz. I've known Senator Cruz when he was the Inspector General and he was working in the Attorney General's office. I know Greg Abbott. Greg was the Attorney General when I went in 8 years ago, and I carried his legislation to the Attorney General's office because we related to one another. Two different groups now. Remember, Rick Perry, our longest-serving governor, was an ag major at Texas A&M, and he had a bunch of good old boys working for him. And Greg Abbott is one of the best attorneys in America, and he's now the governor, and most of his staff are all a bunch of young attorneys. So you're dealing with different people and different administrations. I think that Ted Cruz is probably one of the most brilliant people I've ever known. He's not really warm and fuzzy, though. You'll find when you hear all this stuff, there's not a lot of people that just love Ted. He's not one of these buddies that you go sit in a room and visit with. But he's a nice person. And I've endorsed him, and so is our lieutenant governor, so is our governor, so is our past governor. So, and it's not just because he's the Texas guy. Donald Trump has got a lot of interest. A lot of folks are supporting Trump because he's tapping into the fact that folks are unhappy. I think Marco Rubio's good. I noticed today that Carly Fiorina endorsed Ted Cruz. I'd love to see that ticket. The Democrats could go home. If we ran Cruz Fiorina, we'd win, just for the record. I want to hear some insider baseball that scares me. I really believe that Hillary Clinton, and I'm not trying to get political with you, I'm just telling you what I think. But I think Hillary Clinton is guilty of what she's done. I know that Petraeus got put on probation for doing a whole lot less. I truly believe that she violated her public trust by using that private server. And I know from talking to people I've talked to in the industry in Washington that the Russians have probably accessed that, and some really scary stuff got out to them. And I do not like the way she handled Benghazi. I do believe that she lied to the families. I think they knew what was happening. That's just my opinion. Take it for what it's worth. But the families believe that too. But I think that if we, sometimes you got to be careful what you wish for. There's a lot of Republicans out there that will tell you they wish that Hillary Clinton would get indicted and get taken down so she couldn't be president. If we take Hillary Clinton down too soon, you know what we're going to get? We're going to get Joe Biden, and they call him Uncle Joe in Washington. And we're going to get Elizabeth Warren, the senator from Massachusetts, who's more liberal than Hillary Clinton. And the Biden-Warren ticket would be very, very difficult for Trump anybody to beat. And so if we get Hillary Clinton taken off the ticket, I personally think that Donald Trump, with the right VP, can beat Hillary and whoever she picks. And I believe that Ted Cruz and Carly Fiorina, or Ted Cruz and whoever he picks, but I'm just saying, since Carly endorsed him today, I think that might be it. They might be thinking about that. Governor Perry wants to be the Secretary of Defense. That surprised a lot of people. Yeah, Governor Perry was the only person running for president that has military experience. And he grabbed A&M, he was a pilot. And when he announced, he was in a hangar with a plane behind him with two Latrell brothers on each side of him. So he's very pro fallen heroes, very pro wounded warrior. He's very involved in our veterans. And so he wants to be Secretary of Defense. And I think Carly would make a fabulous Secretary of State if he doesn't make her the VP. She's too smart to be VP, because VP doesn't get to do much. And the Secretary of State's very, very important. If you don't believe that, ask Libya. Look what's happening there, and Syria. But no, seriously, I think you've got to be careful what you wish for. There may be pro-Democrats out here, there may be Hillary supporters out here. And just for the record, I hope Hillary's on the ballot. We can beat her. I don't want Joe Biden and Elizabeth Warren. They scare me.
We have time for one more.
There you go. Who gets to be last? Okay, young man.
Kiera, St. Clair Cyrus, what is your honest opinion of Donald Trump and his campaign?
I have a problem. Look, I think Donald Trump's interesting, and he's kind of fun to listen to. He's kind of a loose cannon, and I'm not sure. Look, I'm gonna have to preface this before I drive a nail in his heart. Any man whose children think as much of him as they do, his sons and daughter, they revere him, they worship him. That tells me that he's probably a good person. Okay, but politically, he's not a Republican. He's not a conservative. You don't have the views he's had for the last 40 years and done what he's done for the last 40 years in the political world, and then wake up one day and go, ooh, I think I'll be a conservative Republican. Unless you're trying to get elected to be a conservative Republican. And so I have an issue. I would tell him if he was standing here right now, I'm not sure you're sincere about your beliefs and what you're telling us you believe as you pretend to be. Because you certainly haven't walked the walk and talked the talk over the last 40 years. Now, can people change their mind? Yes, they can. But he was pretty adamant about some pretty serious issues when it comes to being a conservative Republican just a very, very few years ago. And now all of a sudden he acts like that he's changing. He's seen the light. It bothers me a little bit. And I think Ted Cruz is for real. I've known Ted for a long time. And Ted Cruz, just for one example, he's been the constitutionalist that he is ever since I've known him. Matter of fact, Ted Cruz wrote a paper when he was 17 years old saying that he was going to be, you ready for this? He was going to go to Harvard Law, and he did. That he was going to get elected to public office, and he did. And that he was going to be president of the United States. Now, we all say that when we're kids. I was going to be a cop or a fireman, a teacher, a nurse, or president. You know, back in the day, nobody wants to be a president anymore. But Teddy, when he was 17, said that's what he was going to do. And the only thing on that list he wrote out when he was 17 years old that hadn't happened was president. So we'll see how that all plays out. But, you know, I'll tell you what I do believe, and you can take this home and tell your parents that I said this. If they get to the state convention or the Republican convention, I want the people to have the say. I don't want to take it away from anybody. So if Trump goes and he's the people's choice, then Trump should get it, whether I agree with him or not. You can't take it away from, you can't take the nomination away from someone, because what we do is we serve the people that we represent. And I've known that ever since I got elected. And that's what I'm going to hold Tom Alderson to, our new state rep out here, the state rep-elect. He's a physician, he's an anesthesiologist. He's very conservative. We agree a lot on the platform and the positions. He's got the money to do the job. That's important, that you can afford to do it, and he can do it. And I think he'll be a good member, but I've let him know in no uncertain terms. He needs to understand. He kept saying to me, your house district, I want to be, I want your job. And I told him, I said, let me explain something to you. It's not mine. It's the people of House District 130s. And I had the honor of representing you for the last 8 years. And I'm still in office till January of 17. So I have a busy, busy year ahead of me. If you saw my calendar and where I'm going and what I'm doing and the meetings I'm having and the bills, I'm on the subcommittee for funding for transportation. All these bills that we all voted for that have all this transportation money, I'm going to be in meetings all year. I've got the meetings coming up in September about letting the professors at UT know that they're going to have guns in the class. Break the bad news to them that it's the law. But there's a whole lot of meetings and stuff that I'm going to be doing. So I take it very serious. It means a lot to me. I'm truly honored. And if I can ever help you, we're right over there. Call me, and we'll help you. Thank you.
Let's give Representative Fletcher. Yeah, we really appreciate you coming out and taking this time. We know how busy you are. You just mentioned that. So I brought Jordan up. She's going to present you with a little token of appreciation.
Oh, wow.
This is
Now, did y'all know I was an old cop? You got me something to drink coffee in there? Perfect. Thank you, sir.
This is a little mug that has our High School Journalism Network logo.
Awesome.
So you can remember the trivia.
Well, I guarantee you, come over to the office, when y'all come visit, I bet you see this sitting on my desk when I'm drinking coffee. Because that's part of being a retired cop, when you're drinking coffee. You know, they told me, I've been married 37 years next month. They told me when I was a young cop, they said, okay, you're a Houston police officer now. You will be drinking coffee. You will be smoking. and you will be divorced. Well, I wasn't married yet. And by the way, when I was young cop, more people on the department had been divorced than had not been married. Well, think about that. There were more people that had a divorce. It's a tough job for marriages and families. Almost not as bad as politics though. But, so I did all my time and I did 30-something years, and 1 out of 3 is not bad. I drink coffee. Thank you, dear. I appreciate it very much.
And if you can hang up here, we're gonna have everyone come up and get your photo.
Oh, I'd love to. If y'all give me a copy, I'll frame it and put it in my office.
And a couple last thank yous. Thank you so much, Ms. Picey and the Sideways Journalism crew here. You guys did great. And then there's still a bunch of leftover food in their journalism room, so on your way out, get that up. Thank you to Kelly Ellis, Director of Instruction, and Cy Woods for being able to host this. April 13th will be our next one at Side Fair High School, so save the date. All right, come on up.
Yeah, I'm supposed to. Hey, yeah, move over.
Go over here.
Yeah, where the podium's not in the way.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I'm old Central Texas boy. I'm technically born and raised. Born and raised.
Brady is great.
Yeah, I love that. I go out there, I'm a judge.